Like I said, my name is Mike Gag, and I am a screencaster here with Unity, and we have decided to start doing some lessons here on Twitch TV. So for the people who are currently watching, thank you very much for showing up. And before we begin, I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about what you can expect from this video and from just kind of this live thing here. So ultimately, what we want to do is we want to promote a very classroom-oriented experience, a chance for everybody to follow along and ask questions at their own pace, and have a chance for us to answer the questions as they arise. So not one of those things where you have to wait until the end to ask your questions, and maybe by then you've forgotten it or whatever. So just we wanted this to be a very relaxed, very open environment to kind of talk about some of the different Unity topics, and to ask any questions that you might have. All right, so something you can expect from this series, if everything goes well, we're obviously going to continue having these in one format or another, and we would like definitely there to be an escalation of topics, and a chance for us to start simple but grow and cover more and more in-depth ideas in things here in Unity, to give you a chance to learn some of the more powerful features. So definitely not going to consistently be beginner level stuff. I'd like to see definitely an escalation to covering more topics. As this is the first time we're using Twitch TV, hopefully we have a very solid performance, but there might be some technical difficulty, so hopefully that doesn't happen. We've done some testing and everything, but if it does happen, we apologize ahead of time, and and hopefully we can resolve it pretty quick. So hopefully we won't have any issues, but just so you know, this is our first time really hosting live on Twitch, so hopefully it's pretty straightforward. Okay, so kind of the way this is going to work is oh, okay. Hello, everyone. Say hi in chat if you can. I see that we have a couple of people talking right now. So feel free to talk in chat. That's the best way to ask questions. Will can hear my keyboard. Sorry about that. I do have a loud keyboard, so I apologize. If it's deafening, then maybe I'll have to figure something out there. But any questions that you have, we have the Twitch chat, so feel free just to ask the questions right there in chat, and they will be forwarded on to me so that I can answer them, or they might just be answered right there in the chat room itself. Feel free to join the conversation and talk amongst yourselves and whatever. That the kind of the idea is this is an opportunity for everyone to kind of get together and talk, and well, hello, Mitralone. Hopefully I said that right. A chance for everyone to talk and kind of be a community exercise. All right, so the way this video is going to kind of work is, I'm going to work through some topics. For this particular lesson, they're going to be very intro topics. We have a lot of people who are always saying that, man, they'd really like to learn Unity, but they just don't know where to start, or they don't have time, or for whatever reason, they just don't use Unity. They use some other engine, or they don't do games programming at all, or anything like that. So this is going to be a nice opportunity to kind of cover the basics rather thoroughly. And any questions you have, just ask them while we're going, and yeah, it should be a pretty solid experience. So okay, let's go ahead and get started. Radiant Burrito says loud keyboards are the best keyboards. I agree. I like to rain thunder with my keyboard. All right, so in this video, we're going to start by talking a lot about the Unity editor itself. So what you see up on the screen right now is the Unity editor. And a lot of times when you hear people say Unity, like open Unity or find this in Unity, what they're really talking about is the Unity editor. They're talking about this screen right here. If this is the first time you've ever opened Unity, you're not actually seeing this screen. You're seeing what's called the open project dialog, or the new project dialog, which is a different window. But if you've used Unity before, then you would be looking at something similar. You may not obviously have this particular scene, but you have the Unity editor open. So before we start talking about the different components of the Unity editor, let's talk about that very first dialog that you do see when you're creating a project or opening a project. So if you're in the Unity editor, you can get there by going to File and then looking for the New Project, which will open up our project wizard, okay, or our project dialog. And we have a couple options here. We can create a new project, or we can open an existing project. And for the sake of this particular lesson, we're going to go ahead and create a new one. Before we create a new one, I kind of want to talk about the features of this window. One of the things we have here in the open project is we can see all the various projects that I have here. You know, if you've never created any, you won't have any, but you can open your projects. And in the Create New project, you have the project location, which is this path. Unity bases its projects off of a folder structure, so whatever the name of the folder is that contains your project, that will be the name of your project. So what this is proposing right now is that it creates a new project called New Unity Project, which would be stored in a folder named New Unity Project. Now I don't particularly want to put one there, so I'm going to go ahead and name it something else and put it somewhere else. So I'm going to hit Browse, and what I'm going to do is I have this folder called Unity Projects already made, and I'm going to go ahead and just click New Folder, and I will say Twitch Project, and I'm just going to create an empty folder called Twitch Project. You can call it whatever you want. You can put it wherever you want. If you prefer the desktop or the C drive or wherever you want it, whatever. But I'm just creating it here, and you can see now that I have in my documents Unity Projects Twitch Project this empty folder. Next, I have the ability to import packages. All right, I can import any packages that I want. Now, I want to warn you to use this very sparingly. All right. These packages are great, and there's a lot of awesome stuff in there. But what you often have is, with people that are new to Unity anyway, is they'll just come in here and just be like, I want this and this and this and this and this. And they may not use them all, and they're just going to take up space. They're going to make your project huge for one, and every time you open it, it's going to have to go through those assets and everything. So I very much warn you only to include packages if you absolutely know you're going to need them. I never include any packages. I just always open a blank project and then I import them from within Unity if I find that I need them. All right. So I generally tend to just leave those blank, and I'm going to go ahead and hit Create, and we're going to see that it's going to start building that for me there. You got to see my awesome background for a moment. More importantly, so we have Twitch here. I just want to make sure that opens up in Twitch. Yep, perfect. Okay, I was worried for a second there that my screen capture software would not get the new window. So good. So we have our new project here, and what's cool is that in our folder, so in my folder, here's my Unity Projects folder, I have this new folder called Testing Grounds, and it has all this stuff in it. And this is the stuff that's created by Unity that makes the Unity project what it is. All right. So this is all our cool, neat, whatever stuff. And we'll talk about this. This all has a purpose and a place and whatnot, but we're going to kind of ignore that for now. Just know that it's there, and that's kind of what it is. All right. So, okay. So now we have our new project window here. We've got a lot of blank nothing. All right. Basically, you know, if you're using Unity, the free version, you're going to have a light gray. If you're using Pro, you're going to have a dark gray, unless you chose the light gray color or whatever. I happen to be using Pro, so I have this beautiful dark gray interface, but it's very empty right now. And so let's go ahead and talk about what we're seeing here inside this Unity editor. The Unity editor is made up of many windows, which are called views. All right. So every time you see one of these tabs, like this tab or this tab or this tab, these tabs down here or this tab over here, those are different, what we call views. Okay. And the views all do something very unique. They all have some purpose inside Unity here. And the first view I want to talk about is the hierarchy view, which is this view right up here where I see main camera. So the hierarchy view contains all of the game objects that are currently in my scene. All right. You might be asking yourself, well, what is a scene? What does a scene mean? In Unity, scenes are like our levels. All right. They're a grouping of assets and game objects that build some particular gameplay experience, right? So if I was making a game that had a winter level, I might have one scene with a bunch of snow and mountains and an abominable snowman or whatever in it, right? And then if I had another desert level, right, I'd make a separate scene. I'd make a desert scene. that would be that particular level. So when we're dealing with Unity, whenever you hear anyone say scene, you hear me say scene, basically talking about this particular level, and we build games kind of level by level, right? And you know, we can also have menu scenes and stuff like that, so it's not particularly always gameplay levels, but it's, you know, it's a bundling of assets, so you kind of get the idea of what we're getting at. So this hierarchy view shows us everything that is currently in our scene, and you can see there's only a main camera. The rest of this list is completely empty. Our scene is rather boring. And in our scene view, which, you know, I'm not jumping ahead, we'll talk about that here in a second, but I will show you how to navigate and everything, but for right now I just want to kind of prove a point. In our scene view, we can see our one camera right here, and that's the only thing that's in our scene. Alright, if I were to create anything new and add it to my scene, I would see it here in the hierarchy. Alright, and a couple features of the hierarchy view is the ability to search by hierarchy view. If there's a lot of items in here, I can filter to help me find what I want. And also this menu drop down here that says create. And create gives me a real quick and easy way to add things to my hierarchy view. Alright, so I just click this create button, and I have this whole menu of all these different things that I can make. Now for simplicity, I'm going to go ahead and click cube, just so that you can see when I click this, a cube appears here, and I have a cube here in my hierarchy. So this game object has been added to my scene. Now, don't be confused by the term game object. We'll talk a little bit later about what it means to be a game object and all these things. For now, suffice to say, a game object is just something that exists in my scene. Alright, so I have this cube. Okay, now that's pretty much the rundown of the hierarchy view. It's pretty straightforward. You basically, anything that's in your scene appears there, and you got it. Alright, so the next thing I want to talk about is this inspector view. And in my scene here, or my layout here, the inspector view just happens to be on the other side. If you're using a different layout, your inspector view might be somewhere else. We'll talk about different layouts here later as we progress through this. So the inspector view tells me all of the pertinent information about whatever game object I have selected. So we can see that I have the cube selected. We can see that because it's got these little symbols on it here, and also this blue bar around cube in the hierarchy view. So we know my cube is selected, and we have all these things that make up and describe the cube. Alright, if I were to select the main camera by clicking here in the hierarchy view to select it, alright, I would see that my inspector view changes and I have all these other things, okay, all these other properties of the camera. Now, every game object is a little bit different. Oh, pardon, let me turn that off. Sorry about that, Steam pop-ups. So, every game object is a little bit different, has some different items attached to it, so the things that you see in this inspector view will probably be different for every item you could select. I'm just looking at people saying hi in the chat. Hello, everybody. So they're all very different, but we'll talk about some very similar things that are kind of common amongst all objects here in the inspector view. The first is the name. Alright, so our main camera's name is main camera. I could rename this to be anything I want. That doesn't really make a lot of sense. You know, I'm just going to leave it to be named main camera. But we can rename it here in the inspector view, or in the hierarchy view, I can click and then click one more time and then have this rename ability. Or I can right click on it and rename or anything along those lines. Alright. I also have this checkbox. And this checkbox is a very easy way for me to turn an object on or off. If I uncheck it, the object goes away. It's not deleted, it's just disabled. So if I need to remove something from a scene, but I don't want it to be like really gone, in case I ever want to bring it back, I'll just uncheck that box and it goes away. And then when I want to bring it back, I just check it again, and there we go. We have a tag, alright, and a tag is just a simple way of identification, alright, so this happens to be tagged main camera, but some of the other tags are untagged, respawn, finish, and so on. Alright, and we can add new tags through this tag manager. Okay, we're not going to get into that right now. Suffice to say that we can add new tags if we feel the need to tag our object something different. Tags in and of themselves are used primarily for simple identification. Right? If it's an enemy, I might tag it an enemy. Right? Just so if something collides with it, we can check its tag and see, oh, that's an enemy. Okay. Next to that, we have layers. Now a layer has several defaults, like default, transparent FX, ignore raycast and water, and we can also add a layer. Now while tags are used for simple identification, layers are used for groupings of functionality. Alright, so everything that ignores a raycast would be on this ignore raycast layer. All right, all water would be on this water layer, and I can define my own layers, but layers are conceptually for identifying things vastly by their interactivity and how things interact with them. All right. So that's kind of the distinction. A lot of times people don't understand the difference between tags and layers, and they are really a conceptual difference because it's all about how you utilize them, but that's primarily why there's the two. There's the tag and the layer. All right. Next we have this transform block, and the transform block is at the top of every game object. You can see it's at the top of cube and at the top of camera, and the transform block just has to do with the object's scale, position, and rotation in the world. Every game object has one, and I'm not going to cover that in depth right now. I'm going to wait and we're going to talk about that a little bit later, but just be familiar that that's there. Then the camera starts having its unique components. These are all called components. We'll talk about components a little bit more here in a little bit. Each component does something very specific, and each one can be turned off by using this little checkbox. So you can disable the whole camera, or you can disable the particular components of the camera just by checking the checkbox right next to them. All right. If you want to add a component, you can simply click here, the Add Component button. All right, and you can pick your different components. The nice thing about the Unity editor is there's a lot of different ways to achieve the exact same effect. So I can add a component by clicking the Add Component button, or with my camera selected, I can come up to the component menu and add a component. All right, so there's a lot of different ways to achieve the exact same effect. You saw me create a cube over here in the hierarchy, but I could likewise come up to Game Object and create a cube. Okay, so there's a lot of different ways to achieve some pretty neat effects. All right, so the next thing I want to talk about is the project view, and the project view is down here. The project view in my screen is at the bottom. On your screen might be somewhere else if you're using a different layout. And this project view basically shows me all of the assets that are a part of this particular project. We can see right now that this is empty, but we're going to put some stuff in here. We're going to see how they function. So this brings me to a very important conversation topic, and that's the difference between a game object and an asset. All right. So we see here that we have two game objects in our scene, cube and main camera. Those exist as part of our scene, and they are basically just that. They're just in this scene. We created them on the fly. They belong to this scene. There's no representation of these two objects on our hard drive. There's nothing we can save, okay? They're all just in our scene. Assets, on the other hand, are things like textures, models, sound clips, animations, things that have actual files to them, right? So if I take an MP3 file or an aux vorbis file, audio file, and I put them in an assets folder, they'll appear here in my project view, not in my scene view. Assets can be used in any number of scenes, in any number of projects, while game objects belong to a particular scene. So that's a very important distinction. Oh, I have Mitch Rolona saying anyone cannot see the menu on top. Okay, that's right. You guys can't see that menu. I apologize. I'm using Twitch and it's only showing the inner window. Okay, so I apologize. There is a menu up here. You can see, unfortunately, Twitch is cutting that menu off, and I'm not entirely certain how to adjust this for that. So if you're following along with the Unity editor, you should see at the top File, Edit, Assets, Game Object, Component, Window, and Help. And those are the menus that I'm particularly using. So if I wanted to add a component, there is a component menu up at the top, which is what I'm clicking, which is what you can't see. All right, it just says component. Right next to it, if I wanted to create a game object, there's a menu that says game object, which again is what I'm clicking and what you cannot see. So I apologize for that. It had not occurred to me that Twitch would be, or not Twitch, the software I'm using to stream to Twitch would be cutting that menu off. So I will do my best to not use that menu, or if I am using that menu, I will explain more accurately what I'm doing. So that's my apologies. Thank you for pointing that out. I appreciate it, and hopefully we can just work around that. So sorry. I kind of lost my train of thought. Oh, assets. We were talking about assets. So assets are these files that we can reuse. And so let's take a look at this. So we have this project view down here, and we have this folder called assets. And if you remember previously, All right, let me pull this back up here. In my testing grounds, oh, I'm in the wrong project. I'm sorry, Twitch project. In my Twitch project that I just created here, all right, we have this assets folder. Okay, same folder there. And if I double click that, all right, it's currently empty. Okay, so I have nothing currently in this folder. So now let's take a look at something here. What I'm going to do is in Unity, I'm going to right click the assets folder and I'm going to click create a new folder. And I'll call this one, I don't know, materials. And so now we have a materials folder. If I come back here to my file explorer, I now have a materials folder. If I double click that, we can see that it's empty. All right. So inside my materials folder, if I were to say right click and create and choose a material, which I'll just leave named new material, we can see here that I have a new material file. All right, so our assets are these actual files that exist on our hard drive, all right, that we can move around, we can put in different projects, we can email to our buddies or whatever. All right, these exist, and that's kind of the big distinction. They are files, right? They're persistent. Sorry, I'm just reading the chat there. By the way, again, for anyone who's joining, if you have any questions, use our chat. Those will get relayed to me, and I'm more than happy to answer your questions. So, yep, feel free to have conversations over there in the chat, and if you have any questions, just relay them, and we will get those answered. All right, so we see here that we created a new material, and we got a new material in our menu, or in our folder. We can manage our files both in Unity and in the Explorer, or the folder system that you just saw, our file explorer. However, it is always better to manage your files, your assets, in Unity. If I want to delete this, I should delete it in Unity, all right, and not from the file window, or the file explorer. And the reason is because Unity tracks these, depending on your settings, depending on if you're using versioning control and stuff like that. Unity tracks our assets. If I delete it from within Unity, there's no problems. And if I delete it from the file explorer, there's probably still not going to be any problems. But you never really know. It's just not really worth the risk, right? Every once in a while it might be a hiccup. It might be looking for something that's no longer there. There might be these meta files, a link might get broken there or whatever. So it's always just kind of best to if you're going to do any file management, to do it from within the project view as opposed to trying to do it inside the actual file explorer. It's a great way to avoid any potential issues with that, if anywhere should arise. All right, so as we saw in our assets here, we can right-click either of these folders, and we have a few options. We can import packages and assets. We're not really going to talk about a lot of that stuff. We do have this create, which is where we can create a lot of our assets for the programmers out there who might want to get into scripting, right? This is where we create our scripts, and a lot of different ways we create this stuff. We're not going to talk about any of these today, but just be aware that they're there, and that's how you create them. You can just right-click, or I can just right-click. There's also this create button, which I can click and again create stuff. Okay, so that's how we make things. We also have these favorites menus, which allow us to look for different items. Okay, now if your project gets really complex, you have a lot of assets, the favorites is a great way to find stuff quickly. What I really like the favorites for is, let's say I'm looking for a model that I want maybe from the asset store. I can click on models here, and then I see asset store, and I just click on that, and all of a sudden it's going to allow me to browse the asset store, which is awesome. All right, there's a ton of free assets, there's a ton of paid assets, so it's great. Like, say one of my favorites is this Robot Kyle right here. If I need a quick model to toss into a project, I can just grab Robot Kyle. It's free on the asset store, and I can just import it directly into my scene. All right, so the project view is great for exploring the various assets and stuff like that that are available in the asset store. If you don't want to go through the process of actually opening up the asset store, you can just quickly and easily browse it here. You can also do a search right here in this search bar to kind of filter through some of these items. So that's our project view. Just note that it helps you manage all of the different files that are part of your project. The next view we want to talk about here is the console view. The console view is real simple. Anytime we have an error or a warning, or our scripts output to the console, or they log, like call it debug.log or anything like that, those messages appear here in the console. And the console is just a great way to keep track of what's going on in our program while it's running. All right. This is not a window that I have open all the time, as I only pretty much open it when I need it, which is why it's kind of behind the project here. But just know that that's what the console window does. That's what the console window is. Messages get written there as problems or messages or errors or whatever arise in your program. So just so you know, it's there. It's just kind of tucked back away. All right. So the next view I want to talk about is the big one. All right. We're going to be spending a vast majority of your time, and that's the scene view. The scene view right here, which is the large rectangle on my screen. The scene view is actually giving me a visual representation of everything that is in my scene. So this is where a lot of the power of Unity comes from, all right? If any of you have ever used other game engines, you might know that they are very programmatic in nature. They use a lot of code. There's nothing visual about them. There are visual engines, right? But not all of them. And a lot of the more popular ones are just all code, right? A lot of functionality of code, and you have to be really interested in code and know how to do a lot of code and, you know, basically have a PhD in code to make anything. Well, the Unity engine, the Unity editor specifically, has this scene view, which gives us a very graphical ability to manipulate all the stuff that's in our scene, right? So if I was using a code-based engine and I wanted to move a block left or right, I would need to write the code effectively to move it left or right. However, with a visual editor, if I just click on this, I have these little gizmos here, which we'll talk about more about what these do here in a little bit. But I can just click on one of these and move it left and right, okay? And that's where it is. So we have a lot of power with our visual capabilities that we don't necessarily have in a lot of other game engines, right? So you spend a lot of your time in the scene view putting stuff all over the place. So again, the scene view just kind of shows us everything that's in our scene, and there's a lot to it, and I'm going to cover it. But before we talk about all the different buttons and all the different gizmos and things like that, I want to talk about how we move around, okay? You might have seen me earlier when I kind of moved around in my scene, right? You get to move in and out and pan up and down and all this stuff. So moving around in the scene view is incredibly important, obviously. If you need to see something from different angles, if you need to move stuff around, you need to zoom in, you need to zoom out, you have to be able to do this. So first off, I am not an expert with all of the hotkeys in navigation. There are a lot of different ways that you can move around in your scene. I basically know like 2. And they work well for me, and I've never bothered to learn the other ones. So if you're curious about all the hotkeys that are available for moving around, please check the Unity documentation. And actually, maybe if Will or Adam can put a link to the navigation hotkeys in the chat, that would be fantastic for anyone who's interested in learning all the different ways to move around in Unity. If you could do that, that would be fantastic. But I'm going to tell you the ways that I move around, and because those are pretty much the only ways I know how to, because they do everything I need. So what I generally do is I move only in what's called fly-through mode. And you enter in fly-through mode by just holding down the right mouse button. Now look at the cursor on the screen, and notice when I click the right mouse button down, my cursor changes to this eye with this little Tetris looking block thing underneath it. Now that little Tetris looking block thing represents the WASD keys, the W key, the A key, the S key, and the D key on your keyboard, and enable me to move around. So while I'm holding down the right mouse button, I actually get to move around like I was playing a first-person shooter. So if anyone's familiar with first-person shooters on the PC, this is going to be like second nature to you. If you're not, the W key moves you forward, the A key moves you back, the W key moves you forward, the S key moves you back, the A key moves you left, and the D key moves you right. And your mouse looks. Alright? And those are your basic first-person shooter controllers, right? Your FPS controllers. So in Unity, I just hold down the right mouse button, and you can use a combination of these keys to move around. And that's pretty much how I do a vast majority of my navigation. You can also hold down the left and right mouse button at the same time and pan stuff around. I believe you can hold right and Alt, or is it right and... I don't know. I don't know the other hotkeys. I never use them. I apologize. Maybe we can get that link. That would be awesome. But I find that pretty much WASD key with the right mouse button is everything I need. And if I find I'm moving too slowly, right, I can hold down the shift to move much faster, like sprinting, right? So shift allows me to move really quick. Without shift, I move at a much more tempered speed. Click the... Oh, okay, yep. There we go, okay. Will, who is in attendance, Will Goldstone mentioned turning this on here. We'll talk about what this button does, but for now, basically it shows us a grid, so it helps with navigation so we can see how we're moving around. Will also let me know just now that they can't post links in the chat, so I apologize. And yeah, actually, Will, if you can put that link in Skype for me, I'll post it in the chat there. I should be able to do that. Otherwise, we'll get it to you somehow. We'll tell you how to do it. But it is. Let me see if I can't do that. One moment here. I'm seeing if I can make someone a mod. Will, I just made you an op. You're a moderator now. Congratulations. You've been promoted. Everyone congratulate Will in chat. He is now a moderator. So go ahead and try posting that link now, and if you can't, then I will go ahead and do that. But yeah, so anyway, holding down the right mouse button in WASD is pretty much everything I ever need. Now, there are times, though, when you're looking at this, and you're like, hey, where's that cube at? I want to find my cube, and I can click on my cube, but I can't see it. The other key that I normally use is I hit the F key. And the F key automatically focuses me on with the object itself. So if I'm looking the other way and I hit the F key, there we are. All right, if I'm looking for the camera and I hit the F key, there we are. All right, so the F key allows me to find my stuff really quick, allows me to focus. It says, anyway, I clicked on your name and it said that you are now a moderator, but apparently that's not the right kind of moderator. So let me see if it'll even let me post it. Oh, yep, it let me post it. So there you go. There, I just posted a link in the chat, which is a link to the hotkeys, and so now you can check that out if you have any questions about that. And yeah, so if you have any questions, click that, and that'll show you the different hotkeys, and you'll be good to go. I don't know if that'll move you into a new window or not, so you might want to right-click and like open a new tab or something, so you don't miss the rest of the presentation. But okay. So those are my main forms of navigation, right? I basically use fly-through mode with the right mouse button and WASD keys with shift to sprint and the F key to focus. That does pretty much everything I need, and that's how I navigate around. So now that we know how to navigate around, we can look at some of the different parts of the scene view. One thing I do want to mention real quick here is that the chat client for Twitch is pretty slow, so it might take a second for us to see anything that you type. So just you know, there you go. Just if you're typing something, you're like, why hasn't anyone responded yet? It's a bit slow with people on there and stuff like that. So you know, we will get it. We will see it eventually. So don't worry. Don't be impatient. Please, again, just continue. Feel free to keep talking with each other, with me, with Will, with Adam, with whoever, and just any questions, comments, jokes, whatever. If you know any good knock-knock jokes, knock me out. Go for it. So now that we know how to navigate the scene view, let's talk about some of the things that exist in the scene view. So the very first thing that you might notice is when I have the camera selected, I have this nice camera preview. And when I don't have the camera selected, I don't. So one of the first things you'll notice in the scene view is that we get to see what our camera is looking at, which right now is nothing. But if I were to move this down in front of the camera, we could see that my camera now sees this block. It does look rather boring because there's no lights or anything in our scene, but we can see it. So I can see by clicking on my camera what it is I can expect to see. All right. Another thing that we have here is all of these buttons, or I guess are all of these buttons at the top. So these buttons, I'm going to kind of go through them in order here. The very first thing we do here is we have our render mode drop down. All right. So you can see right now I am in textured mode. Okay. What that means is I'm going to see any textures that are in any of my objects. Now my block here, my cube, has a very basic texture. It's just this little white sphere. I mean, the material is blank white. It's kind of boring, right? but it's there. That's the texture that's on it. If I had it looking like anything else, we would see that texture that was on it. If I click this menu and I go to wireframe now, we no longer see the texture, and now we instead see just the wireframe of this object. All right, which is nice if we need to line some stuff up and we don't want to be distracted by all the visual properties of a texture. We also have textured wire, which is both texture and wireframe at the same time. And then we have a couple things that you're probably not going to use too much. We have render paths, which are great for finding places where things overlap. And then we have light map resolution, but since we don't have any lights in our scene, this is kind of moot. So we'll go back to textured here, just so we can just be back to the standard way of looking at this. The very next drop down here is our color settings. All right, so right now we're in RGB, so we're seeing red, green, blue, color values. We can also choose to look at the alpha values, which basically my cube is being drawn with 100% alpha and nothing else is, so it shows up like this. We have our overdraw, which again is useful for finding overlapping features, and bitmaps, which we don't really have to worry about because right now we're not using texture channels or anything like that. So we basically just always leave it in RGB unless there's something very specific you're attempting to achieve. Then I have these three buttons here, which are my scene effects. The very first one turns on and off built-in lighting. Right now I'm using the built-in lighting because no other lights exist in my scene. If I were to add a light to my scene, built-in lighting would be turned off. Since I don't have a light, it's on, but I can choose to manually turn it off just by doing this. And you can see my cube turns blackish gray, and if I click main camera, it kind of stays the same. The reason it's like that is because there are no lights in the scene. Without any lights, it's going to appear to be completely dark. Alright, so we'll turn our default lights back on, just like that, just so we have it. The very next thing is our basically our environmental effects. So this allows us both to turn this grid on and off, but also it allows us to turn on things like our lens flares, our skyboxes, which we don't have any right now, fogs, and other environmental effects like that. We don't have any of those, but if we did have a bunch of those and we didn't want them cluttering up the scene, we could turn them off. All right, so while we were working to kind of, make our system run maybe a little bit faster or not to be distracting, allow us to work without all those visual effects currently in play. We also have this last button here, which is audio, which basically just allows us to turn audio on and off. Will has a great point here. Will has asked me to mention that lighting has some basic level of light from the ambient light in the render settings. Every scene has these render settings, which basically controls the level of ambient light in a scene. You get to those by clicking the edit menu, which I realize you can't see edit, but I've just clicked edit at the top, and then render settings, and then over here in our inspector we can see our ambient light and our different environmental effects and things like that. So when I was talking about the environmental effects like fog, ambient light, skyboxes, flares that are turned on and off by this button here, this kind of is what I'm talking about, all these render settings. Okay, right now we're just going to leave those all as a default, but just so you know they're there and kind of what they do. Alright, again, just real quick, this button here turns audio on and off. We don't have any audio in our scene, so we're not going to worry about it, but that's what it is, and that's what it does. Alright, over here we have this gizmos drop down. Now gizmos are all these things that we're seeing, right? Like this camera image is a gizmo of the camera. And I can change it to be 3D or 2D, and I can scale it. Right, and I can have a lot of control about which gizmos appear and how they appear, right? And I can choose to just turn off, the 3D gizmos altogether. So I have a bit of control over the different gizmos in the scene and kind of what they do. I don't always just kind of leave them on in default because they don't bother me. Some people hate the gizmos because they fill up a screen and stuff like that. If you have a lot of like lights and things like that that have a lot of gizmos attached to them, it might be good to kind of to turn those down and whatnot. It's all personal preference. Everything you do in Unity is about your own unique workflow. I might love something, you might hate it. That's fine. Unity gives us the ability to work in our own workflow with whatever we feel comfortable with, so we don't have to necessarily conform to the way other people want to do things. We can do things how we want to do it, and that's an incredibly powerful feature. Alright, So now that we've talked about that, let's talk about the scene gizmo here, the main scene gizmo, which is right up here in the corner. This gizmo is where a lot of the power of the scene view comes from. All right. So what we see is this kind of compass rose almost type thing, which has a Y, a Z, and an X. The x-axis is always portrayed as red, Y is green, and Z is blue. And what this allows us to do is to click on any of these and immediately align ourselves to that axis, or that axis, I guess, all right, and kind of change how we want to look at stuff. By clicking on this block in the center again, I go back to being how I want to be. Let me kind of get back to where I want to be. Okay, so I can snap myself to the different axes by clicking on them. I can click this cube also to flip around my different view modes. So as you just saw, clicking on the cube or clicking down here where it says PERSP, PERSP, which is short for perspective, all right, allows me to change how we are viewing our scene. Perspective is the default, so I will see 3D as if it was in fact 3D, all right, with all of the parallax and distortion that comes along with being 3D. However, if I wanted to see something without distortion, all right, like say I was trying to line up two cubes to be perfectly aligned with each other, I wouldn't want perspective because the cubes would be distorted and it'd be very hard for me to visually line up. I can click the center of this block or down here and go into what's called ISO mode. Now, ISO mode stands for isometric, and it allows me to see these this cube here. Oh, I got a little bit too close. See the cube here and stuff like that without any perspective, which allows me to align things much more accurately because nothing is skewed, nothing is changed, warped, or distorted. All right, and so isometric view is really useful for that. But it looks kind of weird, and it's kind of hard to navigate around, so I generally stay in perspective, as does most everybody else. I just remembered one more navigation feature of the scene view that I do use from time to time, and that's the mouse wheel. The mouse wheel allows me to zoom in and out quickly. So there you go, mouse wheel. Forgot about it. I do use it from occasionally, and it is helpful there. So be aware of that. So that kind of covers our scene view. There's one more view I want to talk about, then we're going to start talking about all these different layouts and things like that. So our scene view allows us to see everything that is in our scene, right? If there were a lot of other things in our scene, we'd be able to see those. But we also have this game view. And if we click over here, we can see what the camera sees, all right? This is what we will be playing when we play the game. I can't navigate the game view, all right? I can't interact with it in any way, shape, or form because it's whatever the camera sees, right? And so since I don't have anything in line to move my camera around with the gameplay, I don't have any scripts or anything like that, there's no way for me to manipulate this in any way, shape, or form. All we see is our cube. There's no lighting, so it's a gray cube. But there are some very useful features of the game view here that we want to talk about. The first is our aspect ratio. Right now I'm in free aspect, which means whatever size this scene is, right, that's the size it is. Okay, so if I was on a bunch of different devices, they'd be in different aspects and they would look differently and whatever. I can turn my game view into a specific aspect. I can choose 5:4, 4:3, 3:2, 16:10, 16:9. I like my 1920 by 1080, 1080p kind of definition, which is 16:9. So if I wanted to conform my game view to that, I would choose 16:9. And now you will see that even though I have more room here, the dimensions of the window are not changing. All right. This does not mean that this is the aspect ratio the game will be played in when it's finally finished. The user will be able to choose an aspect ratio from a list that you give them. However, while you're editing it here in the Unity editor, that's the aspect ratio it'll take on, so you can test it and make sure everything looks correct. All right. So your aspect ratio is important. Then we have a couple other things. We have this maximize on play button, which when checked, whenever I run my scene, all right, it will take up the whole editor window. All right. If you don't want that to happen, you just leave it unchecked. If you check it, then obviously you know what will happen. It'll take up the whole scene. We also have stats. So by clicking on this, we can see all of our graphical statistics while it's running. We can see the speed of our thread. We can see our RAM usage and that sort of thing. Our use textures, tries, verts, that sort of stuff. All right. So our stats are a nice and easy way to figure out how things are going. And then we have gizmos here as well, which we can modify. All right. So those are our different views. So and you know, that's where a lot of the power of Unity comes from. So let's talk real quick here about the various buttons that appear in our Unity editor. So we talked about pretty much everything from this line down, but we've got a few buttons up here that are important. So again, we have our menus at the top here, which you guys can't see. They're pretty self-explanatory, but they're the menus. All right, and I'm going to click back over here to my scene view. So we have all our menus, but then we have these row of buttons here. All right. So let's talk about these buttons first. The first, and I'm going to select my cube in the hierarchy, the first is the hand tool. All right, so when I have this selected, I can move my mouse out here and just click and kind of move things around. All right, this is left clicking, not right clicking. The hand tool lets me grab the scene and kind of move everything relative to that. All right, so it's a useful tool for that. If I wanted to access the hand tool, the keyboard shortcut is the Q key. All right, so if I don't have the hand tool selected and I want it, I hit Q and I've got it. The next tool, the run right next to it, is our translation tool. All right, I can click here, and that's what makes these little handles appear. These little handle gizmos appear on the object I've selected, which if I select the camera, they appear there. If I select the cube, they appear there. Or I can hit the W key, and there they go. All right, and then I can move my object around. The next is the rotation, which I can click the rotation, or I can hit the E key, and that's what allows me to rotate an object. And you can see here I've got the different axes. All right, so this is me rotating around the x-axis. You know it's the x-axis because it's the red one. Remember, X is always red. When I select it, however, it turns yellow, letting me know I have it selected. Then we have the y-axis. Y is always green. All right, then we have the z-axis. Z is always blue. Oops, I didn't grab it. Z-axis, Z is always blue. All right, so that allows me to rotate my cube around. All right, and then finally we have our scale, all right, which is this last one here, or if I hit R, that gives me scale, and just like you think it would, it allows me to scale an object to be much, much larger. All right, so now we have this giant cube, which kind of blocks our entire camera view, right? Now, real quick, I don't want to get to talking about all of the different parts of the transform just yet, but I'm going to go ahead and reset this here. And you can Control Z, or I can just come up here and change my scale back to 1, 1, 1 with a rotation of 0, 0, 0, with a position of 0, 0, 0. That actually puts it a little bit further away than it was originally. But I can set those here in the transform, or I can manipulate them here. Remember, like I said before, it's all about what your personal workflow is, okay? And finding the way that you want to work it. So if you don't want to use these handles, you'd much rather increment numerically in the inspector view, you can, right? Or if you never want to look at the inspector view and you always want to manage through here, you can. Or if you want to click these buttons, or if you want to press the keys to access the different tools, you can. So you have a lot of power to choose how you want to do stuff. So that's these buttons right here. All right, and these buttons are useful for getting your different tools to modify your game objects. Then we have our different, basically our transform tools. So we can choose between pivoting on a pivot of an object or in the center of an object, and we can choose whether to use a local or global coordinate system. I generally leave these as defaults unless I'm attempting to achieve something. I'm going to skip these real quick. I'm going to come over here. Here we have our layer drop down, all right, which allows us to see our layers and manipulate our layers. Now, the thing about the layers is this is the layers that will be visible in the Unity editor. So if I accidentally uncheck this, oh, that didn't do what I thought. Uncheck that, default. If I uncheck default, right, all of a sudden my cube's gone, isn't it? And my camera's gone. Everything's gone. So if you happen to be loading up your scene and you go, wait a minute, there's nothing here, but wait a minute, I know there's stuff here, but I can't see it. Why can't I see it? The culprit is likely this menu right up here. All right, this menu allows you to turn on what layers you can and can't see. By clicking everything, everything comes back, and you can see if there's a check mark next to everything, then you are in fact seeing everything. If there's not a check mark next to everything, then you are missing something. All right, and just figure out what it is that's not checked. All right, and then we also have our layout view, which I will talk about in just 1 second. I want to talk about those other buttons before I get here. Okay, so there's these 3 buttons right here. And these are basically how we actually run our scene and test things out. All right. So if I click the scene arrow, all right, my scene starts running. Now my scene is very boring, okay, because it's just a cube without any actual effects or anything like that. It's a very boring scene. There's nothing to it. All right. I unclick this arrow and it stops playing, and I'm back here. So you'll notice that when I click it, I automatically get moved over to my game view and I see my game running. All right. Okay. Now I'm going to go over to my game view and I am going to select this maximize on play just so you guys see it. And come back to my scene and hit play. And now we'll see, boom, it takes up the whole screen. And so that's the maximize on play basically functioning. So that's what that does. So I'll uncheck it again here so we're not worried about it. There we go. Okay, so the next thing we have is this pause, okay, and the pause works while we're running our scene. So if our scene is running and I want to stop it momentarily, I can click pause. Now the scene is still running, it's just paused, okay, which allows me to come back into my scene view and see how things are. If I was playing and my main character just fired a bunch of bullets, I could pause and find the bullets and see what their trajectories were and manipulate them for testing purposes and stuff like that. The game is still running, it is just paused. All right, and then we have this last one here, which allows us to step. All right, to step through iteration once at a time while leaving it paused. And when I'm done, I can just hit the arrow again. I come out of my running scene or my running game, and I'm back here to my scene view. The nice thing about this is if I run my game and I pause it, then I come back here and I move my cube, I can resume my game, and now my cube is moved. Okay, so it allows me to test, you know, positions and rotations and interactivity and functionality, collisions, and all these different things while the game is running, and that's an incredibly powerful thing to be able to do. A little bit of a note of warning though, anytime you change something while the game is running, when you stop running it, all right, it'll change back. All right, so nothing is saved while it's running. So if you're running it and you're testing and you find some properties that you really like, write them down, because as soon as you stop running the scene, they're going to go away again. All right, and you'll have to then manually change them. So just kind of a little bit of a warning for you there. All right, so at that point, that's kind of all of the views in the Unity editor. So that's all that stuff. There's a lot of power there and whatnot. But you might be saying, you know, what if I don't like this layout? Not everyone likes this layout, right? This is the default layout, but you might want a different layout. Well, like I said before, Unity is all about giving you so many options about how you want to work things, right? So we have here a window menu, right, which you can't see the window menu, but you can see it drop down, and then layouts. Likewise, we have layouts right over here. That's the same menu. There's just two different ways of accessing it. But you can see here, let's say I want an editor that looks maybe more like UDK's default editor, or maybe 3D Studio Max's default editor. I can click this 4, and then all of a sudden, here I have the 4-split window, if you will, which has my stuff kind of separated out. So now I have my hierarchy and my project views here. My inspector is here, and I can actually collapse these down a bit just by clicking and dragging, and I can resize. And now what I have here is I have my perspective scene, which I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. My perspective scene here in the upper right, and then over here I have the right hand side in wireframe mode. I have the front view in wireframe mode. Sorry about that. And I have the top view in wireframe mode. And again, I can zoom in using this different fly through and stuff like that, and I can scroll and use the pan tool to pan about. Yeah, and I've kind of rotated there a bit, but there you go. So that's another option. Or maybe you want a really tall format, so you can have a tall format, or you want a wide format, right? So there's all these different ways that you want to do things. And let me come back here to my default. So there's a lot of different layouts that you can use. But what if none of those layouts meet the workflow that you want, right? You can always just click and drag any one of these tabs and move it. Dock it over here, dock it up there, move this down here, all right? Whatever effect you want to achieve. You know, you have a bunch of different docks like this. If you're, I don't know, you like a more weird format like this. You know, whatever's your flavor, right? You can make it happen. All right, what if you wanted 2 hierarchy views for whatever reason, right? You can just add tab and choose hierarchy. Now you have 2 hierarchy views, if that's something that you know absolutely really wanted, you know. So a lot of flexibility with your different layouts. And of course, if you have something that ends up looking hideous like this, you can always just come back and click default and boom. Now, if you create a layout that you really like, all right, you can always come up here to the layout menu again and save your layout. By saving your layout, it'll appear here, and then you'll always just be able to select that if you need to. If you want to change your layout, you can do so. All right. So saving the layout is a great way. If you come up with a workflow that really works for you, whatever, you know, you can just click that and you can kind of go from there. All right. So a lot of power in the way that kind of functions. Apologize for that. I know I have this like super loud keyboard, so in the future I might have to look at getting a slightly quieter one. All right, so just kind of to recap right now what we've talked about so far and what we've covered so far. So we have looked at our different Unity editor modes. We have looked at the open project and the create project dialog. We talked a little bit about the assets of those dialogues. And then here in the Unity editor, which again a lot of people just call Unity, we have all these different views. Okay, and we talked about the different views. We talked about the purpose of the hierarchy view, which is to show us all the game objects in the scene. We talked about the project view, which shows us all of our assets, which are basically files that we have access to. We talked about our console view. We talked about the inspector view, which shows us all of the properties of the objects that we select in our scenes. And then we talked about the scene view and the game view, which shows us both our representation of the scene and our and all the things that we'll be able to see in the game while the game is running. We talked about the buttons at the top here and what they do, and we talked about running our scene and the different layers and the different layouts. All right. So at this point, it's been an hour. It is my intention to keep these to be about an hour so that they're much more easily consumable, so they're not very long. So I kind of want to ask right now if there's any questions. Feel free to post them in the chat. I know we were having some chat issues in the middle of this video. I wasn't able to pay a lot of attention to it since I was talking, but if anyone's still in chat and the chat is working for them, please feel free to post any questions. I apologize. I'm being told here that a lot of that Will and Adam were unable to use the chat for a lot of the time. So if you had questions, we might have not have seen it, and I apologize. One of the whole purposes of this was to allow you to ask questions, and the chat did not work the way we wanted to. So we're definitely going to have to fix this for next time and figure this out. So right now, I kind of want to open it up here for any questions that you might have. Otherwise, we're going to go ahead and wrap up. This video will be available. All right, this is being recorded as we go, and the video hopefully will be available online shortly. So if you want to recap on any of the things we talked about, please feel free to do so. The video will be available for you to watch here on Twitch TV, hopefully in YouTube as well. And the next time we meet, the next time we do this, hopefully definitely want to have the chat fixed, and B, we're definitely going to move from here. I'm going to talk about the game objects, we're going to talk about components, we're going to talk about transformations, translations, rotations, scaling, we're going to talk about the coordinate systems, local versus world, and things like that. No questions have been asked in chat yet. I don't know if that's maybe because you're trying and it's not working, or you just don't have any questions. But at this point, we definitely are going to wrap up. So I certainly appreciate everyone coming in and participating in the our first live demonstration on Twitch TV. And hopefully this is a platform that we continue with and it works out rather well. Hopefully the audio and video quality was good. If you have any feedback, please let us know. Please send us any feedback that you have so that we can improve the videos and any topics that you might want us to cover in the future. As this is something that we're constantly evolving, we're constantly learning and developing more. We're hoping that it will become more user-friendly and becomes more easily for all of you to learn and use Unity, which is ultimately our goal. our probably the best way to reach us is on Twitter. So you can reach me at Mike Geig, which is MikeGeig. You can reach Adam at The Ant Ranch, which is at The Ant, A-N-T, Ranch, R-A-N-C-H, and Will Goldstone at Will, W-I-L-L, Goldstone, Goldstone, for any questions or comments that you have, or just hang out with us on Twitter. As always, thank you very much for watching. I hope you learned. If you did, great. If you didn't, I'm sorry. Stop on back next time, maybe you will. Yeah, get out there and start making some games. Thanks, guys.